Good day, and thank you for joining us. Before we take you into the heart of Nigeria's air war, I want you to do something for me. Look up at the sky for just a moment. Imagine hearing a distant rumble, then seeing a sleek, camouflaged aircraft slice through the clouds. For the farmers in Borno, for the villagers in Zamfara, that sound is changing. It is no longer just the familiar drone of the old Alpha jets. It is the growl of the A-29 Super Tucano, America's $493 million gift to Nigeria's counter-terrorism effort. If you find these deep dives into our nation's security valuable, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories coming. Let's rewind a bit, because the journey of this machine is a story of patience, politics, and pressure. Back in 2015, the federal government went to the United States with a request. They wanted to buy 12 Super Tucano planes. But Washington didn't just hand over the keys. It took until August 2017 for the sale to get the green light under President Obama. And by 2018, Nigeria had wired a staggering $493 million to a US company for the aircraft. For 6 years, it was a waiting game. There were concerns about runways, about human rights conditions, about training. But now, the wait is over. The Nigerian Air Force recently showcased these birds of prey, and they are not just planes, they are flying fortresses. Now, at this point, you might be asking, what makes this old-school propeller plane so special? Isn't this the jet age? Well, that's where the story gets interesting. Imagine strapping a 1979 Volkswagen Beetle under the wings of an aircraft. That's roughly the weight of bombs, 997.9 kilograms, that the Super Tucano can carry. But it's not just about brute force. The retired Air Vice Marshal we spoke to explained it best. The Super Tucano is built like a tank. It has Kevlar armor that can withstand heavy machine gun fire. It can fly for 8.5 hours, loitering over the battlefield, watching, waiting.
But here's the magic. The avionics. These planes have electronic displays compatible with night vision goggles. They have a forward-looking infrared sensor. They have a laser range finder. And the defensive system? If a terrorist on the ground somehow gets a lock on the plane with a guided weapon, the pilot hears a beep. Immediately, the plane deploys flares and chaff, little pieces of metal that confuse the missile's radar. The plane becomes a ghost. Let's pause and think about the human side. For the pilots, sitting in that cockpit at 20,000 feet, they are not just flying, they are hunting. They are looking for the glint of a machine gun, the heat signature of a hideout, the movement of armed men on a path. So, how has this machine actually performed? Not just in theory, but in the dirty, dangerous business of war. Let me take you to a specific date, November 29, 2025. It was about 3 a.m. in the Timbuktu Triangle, a notorious terrorist haven in Borno State. Around 300 Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters launched a coordinated pincer assault on the troops of the 28th Task Force Brigade. They tried to overrun the position. For 2 hours, soldiers on the ground fought for their lives in the dark. But the terrorists had made a mistake. Their escape route was identified. As they tried to withdraw, the Air Force vectored in the Super Tucanos. Imagine the scene from the terrorists' perspective. You've just failed to overrun an army base. You're exhausted, retreating into the forest. You think you're safe under the cover of darkness and trees. Then you hear it. The sound of the Tucano. You can't see it, but it sees you. Through its infrared cameras, your heat signature is a glowing target. The first strike hit a cluster of fighters trying to regroup. Then another. Then the armed drones joined in, finishing off the survivors who scattered. Scores were killed. The military called it a textbook case of air-ground integration.
Another angle to this issue came just recently, in the last few days. Acting on intelligence, the air component of Operation Hadin tracked ISWAP terrorists to a place called Chillaria, deep in the Timbuktu Triangle. The terrorists thought they were clever, hiding under dense tree cover and thick vegetation. But the Super Tucano's sensors pierced through the leaves. The airstrikes were pinpoint. Secondary explosions confirmed what the terrorists had hidden: stockpiles of weapons and bombs. Dozens were neutralized. This is the capability we are talking about: precision, persistence, power. But here's where the story gets deeper and where we must be honest with ourselves. If the Super Tucano is this lethal, if it can carry Piranha and Sidewinder missiles, if it can drop laser-guided bombs, why are we still talking about bandits kidnapping villagers? Why do terrorists still hold territory? Why did over 2,200 people die at the hands of bandits and insurgents in the first half of 2025 alone? Let's look at this clearly. The Super Tucano is a weapon, a brilliant one, but just a weapon. War is not won by aircraft alone. First, the enemy adapts. When the jets appear, the terrorists disappear. They stash their guns, blend into the civilian population, or hide in caves and under thick foliage that even infrared has trouble with. They fight asymmetrically. Second, the Super Tucano is a tool for tactical wins, but the war is strategic. You can kill 100 fighters today, but if you don't have enough troops on the ground to hold that territory, it will be reoccupied by tomorrow. As one military analyst noted, the aircraft targets logistics, training facilities, and equipment. It's difficult to fight individual human beings from the air if they are mixed with civilians. Third, and this is the painful part, we have a defense dependency problem. The very deal that brought us these planes came with strict end-use monitoring from the US. There are human rights conditions, there are rules of engagement, and more fundamentally, as a brilliant piece in Military Africa pointed out, we are spending billions on foreign equipment while starving our local defense startups of contracts. We are buying fish instead of learning to fish.
On the ground, the feeling is complicated. In Maiduguri, when people hear the jets, they feel relief. But it's a cautious relief. One elder in a liberated village said, "The jets are good. They chase the dogs away. But the dogs come back when the jets go home. We need farmers. We need roads. We need the soldiers to stay." This brings us to the critical questions we must ask ourselves today. Is air power enough? If we have the best planes in the world, but we don't have the intelligence network on the ground to find the targets, what are we really bombing? And more importantly, why are we as a nation still relying on the United States to conduct airstrikes on our own soil in Sokoto State as recently as December 2025? Let's pause and think about that. On Christmas Day 2025, US Africa Command conducted airstrikes in Sokoto against ISIS targets. Nigerian officials said they cooperated, provided intelligence, but the optics are devastating. The giant of Africa had to call in a foreign power to hit targets inside its own borders. That is not a failure of the Super Tucano. That is a failure of comprehensive national strategy. So, what is the way forward? How do we make sure the Super Tucano is not just a very expensive, very loud noise in the sky? First, we need to double down on intelligence. The plane is only as good as the coordinates it is given. We need human intelligence on the ground, local hunters, vigilantes, and community members who can feed information to the military. In that November 29 operation, it was the escape route being identified that made the strike successful. Intelligence was the hero. Second, we need to fix the dependency problem. The article from Military Africa hit the nail on the head. We need to invest in local drone technology. Companies like Breach UAS and TerraHaptics are building combat drones here. We need to fund them, contract them, and use them. The Super Tucano costs $1,000 per flight hour, which is cheap by jet standards, but it's not free. Drones are cheaper. We need a mix. Third, and most importantly, we need to couple air campaigns with ground governance. You cannot kill an ideology. You can only kill the people holding it. The ideology dies when a child in Borno has a school to go to, when a farmer in Zamfara can go to his field without fear, and when a young man in the north has a job that pays better than a bandit's ransom.
As the sun sets over the runways at Kainji Air Base, where these Super Tucanos are now stationed, we have to accept a difficult truth. The plane is here. It is lethal. It is saving soldiers' lives and killing terrorists. But it is not a miracle. The fight against terrorism and banditry will linger as long as the conditions that breed them exist. Poverty, illiteracy, injustice, and ungoverned spaces. The Super Tucano can buy us time. It can clear the battlefield, but it cannot build a nation. What do you think? Can air power alone defeat an enemy that hides among the people? Or are we just putting a very expensive bandage on a wound that needs surgery? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get this conversation going. And if you've stayed with us this long, you clearly care about where our country is headed. Please, click that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the full picture, not just the politics, but the reality of the fight. Thank you, and may we see peace in our time.